Hello and welcome to episode 219 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, as always joined by Evan Silva. And today we have a very, very special guest. This is a young man who has dedicated his professional career to studying how 300-pound men bang into each other at the line of scrimmage. He is, in my opinion, the preeminent offensive line evaluator in the space. It is Brandon Thorn of both ETR and the Trench Warfare newsletter. Brandon, welcome back. How's it going?
Going great, guys. Happy to be here. It's a pleasure to join you guys.
Evan, good afternoon. What's happening?
It's going great. Love having Brandon Thorn on. He is one of the best specialists, in a certain niche area. He absolutely crushed it. Watches the end zone view, which, nobody else watches, but Brandon Thorn sits down and watches the end zone view. And it's great to have him on. You got to check out Brandon Thorn's Substack. I subscribed a couple of months back. Incredible information there if you want to get a little edge when it comes to offensive line play. It's Trench Warfare at Substack.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, trenchwarfare.substack.com. Yep.
All right. On today's show, as you might expect, we are going to talk offensive lines. I personally think that a lot of the edges in football analysis have kind of been sucked out. It's kind of known, especially ones that mean a lot to the spread and stuff. Things that are worth 1, 2, 3 points against the spread. But line play is just, it's just so under discussed and under analyzed relative to the impact it has on how a game plays out. So I am excited for today. I am also excited for Brandon's offensive line rankings, which will be up in the draft kit on Friday. Full 1 through 32 rankings coming from Brandon as we get set for fantasy football peak draft season. Before we get into today's show, I want to remind everyone of 2 things. The news is coming in hot and heavy from camp. Our draft kit constantly updates for our latest rankings and adjustments as we track everything. Silva's tiers, team previews, sleepers, busts are coming. And of course, in the draft kit, as I mentioned, will be Thorn's full 1 through 32 offensive line and defensive line rankings. Second, I must remind everyone this show is indeed brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They just launched another $5 buy-in best ball tournament. This one, $500,000 prize pool. If you have the draft kit, you're entitled to at least $10 free on Underdog. Please take the free money, fire it at the puppy, read our strategy guide, upload our rankings, etc., etc. Okay. All right, boys. I want to start with the bad because I have some general questions for Brandon, but I have 2 specific ones we have to start with because we have very talented players who some people are shying away from almost exclusively solely due to offensive line concerns. And honestly, I don't know how valid that is. So I'm glad we have Brandon here. We're going to start with the Steelers because, Najee Harris has one of the best projected workloads in the NFL. I would be shocked if he stays healthy and finishes with fewer than 300 touches. But as we saw last year, this was arguably the worst run game in the NFL. And the offensive line took a lot of the blame. So let's start there, Brandon. How much of the blame do you think the offensive line last year is for the Steelers' run game? And how do you think their offensive line will fare this year?
I think a good amount should be put on the offensive line last year. A large portion of that was due to injury as well. David DeCastro has kind of been their best player. He's no longer there now, but he was hurt a lot of the last season, and I think that really hurt him. But they had injuries, across the board pretty much all year. They had to play, a rookie and just had a lot of turnover last year. I think we kind of saw it coming. It probably was a little bit more abrupt than even I expected it to be, the drop off. But injuries, really accelerated that, I think. And now, heading into this year, there's still a lot of uncertainty, but there's some youth injected into things now, and they're definitely it's definitely a revamped unit. I think all 5 starters are going to be new, at least different positions for a couple starters from last year. So all 5 are going to be playing a different position than they played last year, at least. And I right now I'm going into the year a little down on them, with the expectation that they'll probably get better if they can stay healthy and kind of get that time together to work stuff out. But yeah, they have to stay healthy for that to happen, just because there's so much newness around there now, that it's tough to really be too optimistic on them going in.
So the Steelers, the downslide of the Steelers offensive line, although it has coincided with guys getting older, Ali Villanueva, Ramon Foster retired, David DeCastro, suffered a bunch of injuries and seems like he's on the back end of his career. I mean, he's not even in the league right now. But also coincided with the loss of Mike Munchak, who I think is widely regarded as the best offensive line coach in the league. Meanwhile, the Broncos offensive line took a huge step forward last year, I think, at least by, Football Outsiders, Pro Football Focus metrics, which I know Thorn doesn't always agree with. But how much impact really do you think can an offensive line coach have on a situation like this? And what do you think of the Steelers offensive line coach now? Could he be a guy that could coach up these young offensive linemen into, something like maybe a league average group?
Yeah, so I've heard really good things, just in sort of some like back channel ways of Adrian Clem, who's their new offensive line coach now. So that's what I'll say about that. I mean, I think that he, has a chance, to get them better. And I like some of the players there as well, especially the younger guys, their future prospects. And then just in terms of offensive line coaching, I think that position coach probably makes more of a difference than any of the others. And I think it really is because they're coaching 5 guys on the field at the same time, whereas all the other positions, aside from maybe DB, and I think DB coach, generally are very valuable as well. That's why you see a lot of them become defensive coordinators. I think almost all the top defensive coordinators right now have a DB coach background. And, but yeah, I think there's kind of a parallel there. I actually just wrote about that as well in DB and offensive line. And a large reason for that is because there's a team within the team dynamic at place for both of them. Typically there's 4 or 5 of those guys on the field at the same time. So having a coach that can get those guys to be on the same page can really pay dividends on the field, just because of the nature of that and just how much those guys rely on each other. And, I just don't think that can be overstated. So that's invaluable. Having a guy like Mike Munchak, he resurrected Garrett Bowles' career. I think he pretty much created Alejandro Villanueva's career in a lot of ways. Former Army wide receiver, now he's going on year 7 or 8 or whatever as a left tackle. I think Munchak deserves a lot of that credit. So yeah, I think offensive line coach, and you look at what Bill Callahan did last year in Cleveland. Those are like the 2 top dogs right now in the business, and their presences are felt everywhere they go. So I think it makes a huge difference having a really quality offensive line coach.
So on the Steelers, it sounds like you have at least some optimism on their talent. I mean, I am not a guy to say that Najee Harris can't do it because the offensive line is weak. You have the offensive line 28th. Sounds like you at least think they have a chance to get towards league average or something if they can stay healthy and maybe develop a little bit of their talent. What do you think about for this year, their chances of getting to league average?
I think it's decent. I think they definitely can climb from 28, maybe to 20, kind of that range, at least jump the tier that they're in now, tier 5 to tier 4. I certainly think that's possible. I'd be kind of surprised if they got to tier 3. That's possible, but I would bank more on like a tier 4 ceiling this year, which would be good enough, for guys to get production and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I really like Kendrick Green, their center. He's the guy I did a film room with and was around at offensive line masterminds, watched a ton of his film in Illinois. I think he's going to be a guy who can come in right away and be pretty good, especially in the run game. And that's a big thing that I think we should at least touch on with my rankings. I'm trying to gear all this towards pass protection as well, in terms of how we're trying to predict pressure and things like that. So I think that they're going to probably be a better run blocking unit than pass blocking unit, which I think is important to say. But like Kendrick Green, for instance, I think better run blocker. Try Turner, better run blocker. Kevin Dotson, who I'm a huge fan of as well. I think he's probably a better run blocker, but he's a pretty good pass blocker as well. And then their tackles are really what has brought them down to this point. at 28, because I think their interior has a chance to be pretty good. It's just their tackles worry me. It doesn't matter who it is. If it's Banner, Okorafor, or I think the rookie from Texas A&M, Dan Moore, has a chance at starting at left tackle as well. I mean, I kind of like Moore, but I think the variance in those guys is huge. And that's what really worries me is they're a better run blocking unit than pass blocking. And also the tackle situation it doesn't look great.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that Evan and I have talked about is the Steelers cannot do what they did last year, which is try to drop back Big Ben 30, 40, 50 times a game. That's just not going to work. They're going to try to run the ball. And I've grown warmer and warmer on Najee Harris as the process has gone along. I'm not too worried. I like to hear what you're saying about their run blocking and their interior. I'm not too worried about this for Najee. Let's go to the Bengals. I mean, my God, for as long as we've been doing this, 10, 15 years, I don't know. It seems like decades. This offensive line has been an issue for the Bengals. They had a chance to take Penei Sewell at number 5 overall. Evan thought they should have taken Penei Sewell, I believe, at number 5 overall. They pass on him in favor of Jamar Chase. So now they have all these outrageous skill players. You could say they have one of the best skill sets in the entire league. Burrow, Mixon, Chase, Higgins, Boyd. Is the offensive line so bad for the Bengals that the offensive line can ruin this offense for them? Brandon, what do you think about the Bengals offensive line outlook this year?
I think it's better than last year. I'll say that for sure. Even though I have him at 27, I think last year coming in, I had him lower than that, with not much of a positive outlook at all. Now they're low going into the season, but I think there's some room to jump a tier as well for them. Adding Riley Reif at right tackle, I think Reif is probably going to be a better right tackle than left tackle, and he's going to be better than Bobby Hart. So that's an upgrade. There's a lot of uncertainty on the interior to me. I like Quentin Spain. I think he's a better run blocker than pass blocker, but it's injuries with him. If he's going to be on the field for 16 games or 17, I don't think that's likely. And then, to not replace or outright upgrade Michael Jordan right now. I know they drafted the Clemson guy, Jackson Carman, who I would assume is going to take that role sooner rather than later at left guard, and put Michael Jordan on the bench where he should be, honestly, because he's the one who created that injury for Burrow last year. And, he, in my opinion, was probably the worst left guard in football last year. So I would assume Jackson Carman is going to be there. And then if Carman takes over that position, which I haven't heard a whole lot about him so far in camp. I don't even know if he's practicing yet. He might be. I'm not sure. I haven't written up their portion of my article yet, but I'll look into that. So if Carman is there, then I'll be a little bit more optimistic about
Carman
this.
has been practicing.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just reading about this yesterday. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So I would assume Carman is going to take over that position. And when he does, and all that works out and he's in the lineup, then, I think we can look at this unit being a little bit better, but not dramatically. Trey Hopkins at center, I think he's solid, maybe below average even. He's just a smaller guy. He doesn't anchor very well against powerful guys. And in the AFC North, he's seeing a lot of those guys. So, I'm very optimistic about Jonah Williams. Him coming back is probably the biggest reason why I'm optimistic about them having a chance to rise in these rankings. So even though they're 27 going in, I think that there's a couple different avenues for them to get better this year at least. It's better than last year.
Yeah. One thing that slipped my mind was Trey Hopkins tore his ACL, I think in week 17 last year, and just kind of glossed over it. No one was really paying attention to the Bengals at this point, but he has gotten back he's already practicing. Yeah. And it does seem like offensive linemen tend to recover from these injuries a little bit better than skill position players. I just, and I'm not going to say anything negative about Jamar Chase, but it was just kind of discouraging that the Bengals allowed this offensive line problem to continue when they had a chance to draft Penei Sewell at number 5 overall with all the question marks. Every single guy on the front 5, and you painted a nice picture there. An optimistic picture there, Brandon. Every single guy on the front 5 has like a major concern. Riley Reif right now is not practicing. He's well into his 30s. The left tackle, Jonah Williams, hasn't been able to stay healthy for the most part in the NFL. The center, Trey Hopkins, is coming off an ACL tear. Michael Jordan, as you just laid out, stinks. The left guard, Jackson Carman, came out. He had the back injury coming out. And he got mixed reviews, from the people that I listen to, Bob McGinn and his scouts, or Lance Zierlein, or, he got mixed reviews. So it seems like every single position on the offensive line has a big question mark. And then when you combine that with the fact that Joe Burrow is coming off ACL, MCL, plus other damage, and that happened. That did not happen like early last season. Like that happened in week 11, and then he had his surgery on December 2nd. I wish they would have gone with Penei Sewell, but I'm not going to say anything negative about Jamar Chase.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing is, they, instead of taking that one big shot on offensive line with Sewell, they took 3 shots in the draft, and added 3 guys, which, I think there's some validity to that strategy, with how the Bills have built their line and stuff like that, just throwing more darts at the board, you know what I mean? And just trying to go that route. Deontay Smith is a tackle, and then Trey Hill's a center, and then Jackson Carman's a guard. So they got these 3 rookies coming in. I kind of like Hill. I wasn't a big fan of Smith. I mean, I scouted and wrote scouting reports on all these guys for Bleacher Report. So Jackson Carman is a guy who is very, very talented. He played tackle at Clemson. I liked him better at guard. So I'm glad to see him there. It's just, he kind of reminds me of Eric Flowers in terms of his playing style. And I'm talking about Eric Flowers, the guard. He's very physical. He's a good run blocker. He's athletic. It's just his hands are kind of wild, and I think penalties might be a concern there as a pro. And I think he's going to take some time, but the upside is certainly there with Jackson Carman, I think. So that's why, there's some intrigue here now, as opposed to last year where it's like, they're bad going in and they're going to stay bad. Now I see it where there's some options, at least here, to where they can be in that below average range as opposed to where they are heading in.
Yeah. A very clear priority needs to be to protect Joe Burrow. I mean, we got a question from Ben. He said, as a Bengals fan, he tries to be logical, but who nevertheless always feels some small amount of hope before the season. Can you just put me out of my misery and tell me how effed Joe Burrow is? And obviously, even the fans know that they need to keep Joe Burrow upright this year. I know there's been some major negative reports in the past 3 to 4 days coming out of Bengals camp. Joe Burrow is not playing well. He doesn't look right. 5 to 6 weeks before the season starts, I am not panicking on my Bengals stacks, although I am up to my eyeballs in Bengals stacks. So I hope Brandon's optimism is right and Joe Burrow is able to stay on his feet. All right.
Yeah. So just one thing too that I think is important to point out with these rankings. I'm kind of looking at these. Obviously, we're trying to rank pass protection, putting a little more emphasis on that than run blocking, but also this is how they look on paper heading into week 1 with kind of a projection through the first half of the year, and because we're going to do a midseason update where I'm going to basically re-rank everything. So that's how I'm looking at it. I'm looking at from week 1 to week 8 or whatever. That's how I kind of see these units playing out as pass protecting units primarily. So that's why, I like that we're talking about it and flushing it out, because then I could say, there's some upside here to where in the midseason update, I'm expecting the Bengals, I think there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be higher than this. So I just think that's kind of important background.
By the way, Brandon obviously has the preseason rankings coming out in the draft kit each week in the offensive line, defensive line mismatch article. He ranks the offensive lines as they go along each week. And then the big midseason update will come in the in-season package around week 8. All right, let's get to some general questions here. Most improved units from last year, Brandon. Anybody come to mind to you as the most improved units year over year from 2020 to 2021?
Yeah, 2 really jump out to me, and I think they're pretty obvious. The Chiefs is one, 4 new starters, and they're all kind of, I think, at least solid or better guys, I think, right away with some tremendous upside. Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey via the draft. I was a big fan of Creed Humphrey at center. I think that's his job. I'm pretty sure just based on, Twitter and, beat reporters and stuff, that's his job. which it should be. He's very cerebral, very good run blocker, very smart as a pass protector. I think he's going to be able to quarterback that line right away. And that's I think the biggest upgrade that they had almost, arguably, just because center for them has been a position since Mitch Morse left a couple of years ago where it's just kind of been just a revolving door. So I think Creed Humphrey is really going to solidify things for the interior. And then obviously signing Joe Thuney to the richest contract in NFL history for a guard. Slight overpay because he's not Quentin Nelson or Zach Martin, but he's a very good player, very reliable. And I think that was a good signing. And Trey Smith is kind of the wild card, really. He slipped very far in the draft. I think a lot because of the medical issues that he's had, blood clot in his lungs at Tennessee, which is, a very serious thing. But talent-wise, size, traits, measurables, all the stuff that you can see with him is just like obvious Pro Bowl potential. He had a lot of technique issues at Tennessee. He did not receive good coaching at the University of Tennessee for offensive line at all. So he went to go see Duke Manyweather in the offseason, got some tweaks to his stance, lost a ton of weight, and now he's being coached by a really good offensive line coach in Andy Heck. I mean, that has potential to be like the steal of the draft kind of pick there for Trey Smith. And then Orlando Brown, I am not as high on his projection in this offense as it seems to be others are. He's coming from Baltimore going to Kansas City. That's night and day. I would assume that Kansas City is going to run the ball a little bit more this year and incorporate more gap concepts into their run game because they have basically 4 of these 5 offensive linemen are very good pullers, very good run blockers. So that would just make sense to me. So maybe the transition for Orlando Brown isn't as stark as you would initially think, but still they're going to be passing the ball more than they were in Baltimore. He's going to be asked to do much more difficult things than he was in Baltimore. So I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but I don't think he's elite. And I think some people may, some things I've read, it's trying to signal that he might be on the cusp of being elite. I don't see that. I see more of like an above average starter. I just think that's important context there, nuance. And then Remmers is just kind of a veteran guy who's decent at everything, but, pass protection is his weakness. But I mean, just the amount of resources that they dedicated to the line. They have obviously a tremendous coaching staff, great play caller, great offensive line coach. Yeah, I mean, I think they're the most improved unit in the league without question. And then the other one would be the Chargers. And for similar reasons, 4 of the 5 starters are new. I'm encouraged by pretty much all of them. I think Rashawn Slater is going to be a stud right away. And Matt Filer is a decent guard. I think he'll be better than what they had last year. And Dan Feeney and Forrest Lamp, guys like that, he's more reliable. Plus he can kick out to right tackle in case Brian Bulaga gets hurt, which I really like that because Bulaga's a stud as well, but his injuries are very concerning.
Already missing time in camp, Bulaga.
Yeah. I mean, he's awesome when he plays. It's just he has, I think, 2 or 3 ACL tears, a back injury from last year. So, there's a lot of wear and tear there. Corey Linsley obviously had the best year of his career last year. He's been solid for a long time. I think that's going to be a really nice addition there for Justin Herbert as much as anybody. Ode Obushi is a guy I really loved last year. I think he was the curve of his career has been incredible because I thought he was pretty rough to watch when he was with Seattle. But last year in Detroit, I mean, something clicked with him. And now we'll see if he can replicate it again, but just so much more upside for the Chargers this year than I can recall. And there's just a lot more talent there. Yeah, I mean, and plus I like a rookie that they added in the 5th round and Brandon Hymus as well. So yeah, I think those are the 2 that really jump out.
Yeah, those are 2 good ones for sure. I know, Evan, we've talked a lot about continuity. I don't know how you feel about that, Brandon. Obviously, they have to improve in some way. You're going to lose a little bit of continuity there. Does that give you any pause at all on these teams that are changing a lot?
Yeah, I mean, it does a little bit, but I'm kind of banking more on just the talent, winning out over the continuity, because continuity is great when the players are good.
Sure.
When they're okay or, below average, then it doesn't mean as much. So they certainly needed the upgrades. So I'm not going to fault them too much for that or have a pessimistic view of it, because especially with Kansas City, just their environment, their structure of, how offensive line friendly that place is. I think that it won't matter as much there, especially with Andy Heck, who I think is a very good offensive line coach. The Chargers, I have a little bit more hesitance on. That's why they're a little bit lower in the rankings, but I think they will be higher for me than most people. That's just because I think the players that they added, especially Lindsley and Slater, are legit. Like they're going to be legit guys. And if Bulaga stays healthy, that, you'll have 3 dudes on the line at probably the most important positions. And then the guards, I think are interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I can see the Chargers being a little lower for some people because of lack of continuity and stuff. But, yeah, I mean, I think health is the biggest concern for me with the Chargers, as it seems it always is for their whole team.
Yeah, they got doctors puncturing lungs and stuff. Go ahead, Evan.
Speaking of continuity, Jacksonville is bringing back all 5 starters. My theory is that this offensive line could be a little bit better just if they get better quarterback play, because a lot of times, sack statistics and quarterback hit statistics are the result of quarterback play, maybe more often than not. And when you're trotting out guys like Nick Foles and Jake Luton and, Gardner Minshew and, Gardner Minshew, he's had his moments, but he holds on to the ball way too long, makes the offensive line look worse. But now they're bringing in Trevor Lawrence, who is going to, stand in. And I mean, he's pretty fearless, and, he'll know when to get the ball out quickly, and he'll know when to, when he's got some time and, throw the ball downfield. But my theory is that Trevor Lawrence coming in sort of like Andrew Luck did as a rookie, when there wasn't, they didn't have a great offensive line at that point. And they added pieces. I mean, Chris Ballard did an amazing job of rebuilding that offensive line in Indianapolis. But, you didn't notice the problems on the offensive line as much because Andrew Luck essentially elevated the play of the people around him. Could we see the Jaguars be a team that takes a leap simply because the quarterback is going to make the offensive line look better?
I think that's a great point. Just because watching them last year, I watched a lot of their offensive line, and just seeing a guy like Gardner Minshew play a little bit over the last couple of years, very erratic in the pocket, and that, to your point, is a huge part of, especially obviously pass protection. It's just huge because where if a guy looks like he loses a block, and you don't understand the angle of the quarterback's drop and how he shifted over and gets kind of, happy feet in the pocket, it can make a good block look bad very quickly. And I think you saw that over the years in Jacksonville a lot. So that's a great point. And I think that certainly can make them better in the eyes of most people. And that's part of the reason why I'm a little higher on them than maybe some others. I have them at 15 right now. And I feel like that could be a couple spots higher. When we just were speaking about continuity, they're one of, I think, less than 5 teams in the league that have all 5 starters returning. I think, outside of my elite tier, all 3 teams in my elite tier have all 5 starters returning. But outside of them, I think the Jaguars are the only team in the league with all 5 starters returning. Other teams would have all 5 if they didn't have injuries. But yeah, so I think that is important in this case because, even if Jacksonville doesn't have an elite player on their line and maybe not even a very good player, I think all these guys are at least average. And when you have average guys coming back together, this is actually the 3rd year in a row that they're going to be coming back together. 3rd year in a row with the same offensive line coach as well, which I think is interesting. Urban Meyer retained George Warhop, who has a very good reputation among players in the league. So there's a lot of continuity here with the line. And I am still optimistic about the tackles in Jawan Taylor and Cam Robinson. there's a lot of nuanced conversations to have about technique and things that they've been dealing with and why their play has been up and down, which it has been up and down. But you still see stretches of play from them to suggest that they can be better players than they are, especially if they're able to stay on the field. So I'm encouraged by this line. I think 15 is a really good spot, middle of the pack, right on that average line. And I think that they have a chance. They don't have the highest ceiling, but I think that they can be a couple spots higher. I think their floor is relatively high.
Nice. So Jaguars, Chargers, Chiefs. You have Chargers 9, Chiefs 7. We didn't mention Cowboys. Obviously, they're improved just by getting 3 of the best linemen in the NFL back, right? We don't spend a lot of time here. It's just very obvious. You get 3 of the best offensive linemen in the NFL back, you're going to be very much improved. You have the Cowboys up at 5th overall. I assume there's no concerns about them now that they get all 3 of those guys back.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I try to, withhold optimism on Tyron Smith every year. This is the first time he's had a neck procedure. Mm-hmm. And I've also heard some just really good things about where his body's at from guys who have worked on his body. So we'll see. But if he is able to be 85% of what he was at his peak, even 80%, the big thing with him is he needs to play 12 or more games. That's kind of my benchmark for guys. Like if a really, really good player can play 12 or more games, chances are that offensive line is going to reap the benefit of that. So I think that it's probably a toss-up 50-50 chance, honestly, if Tyron Smith plays 12 or more games at an 80-85% rate of what he was. But this ranking is on the erring on the optimistic side of that. So hopefully that happens. And then obviously La'el Collins coming back, I think, is huge. In 2019 he was one of the best right tackles in the league. And then Zach Martin last year got hurt and had to play right tackle, and so him getting to settle back down and everything is huge. They have question marks at left guard and center still a little bit. But Connor Williams, I thought, gradually got better last year. And finally, because I think it took him a while, but I think their biggest question at this point is at center. But I really like the depth there as well. Because of the injuries that they sustained last year, they have these 2 tackles on the bench now with 23 combined starts under their belt. You don't want them starting for prolonged stretches of time, but they have that invaluable experience in their back pocket, Brandon Knight and Terrence Steele, to where now you have 2 capable swing tackles, and you have Ty Nsekhe, who I think is probably better than both of them. He's older and was hurt last year. So you have 3 guys battling for the swing tackle spot who all are, viable guys. So that's encouraging to me as well. So that was baked into my ranking as well. I think they have underrated depth.
Yeah. Okay. What about the opposite? We talked about teams who have improved year over year from last year. What about teams who have gotten worse? Who do you think are some team or teams who have gotten significantly worse from last year?
Well, the Steelers, I think, is the first one, just because of the reason that we've already touched on. So we don't really have to go into that one too much. Another one that jumps out to me is the Raiders. Just them losing or, getting rid of their 3 best players, arguably, center, right guard, right tackle is, it was a bold, strategy, questionable in my opinion. But it's understandable at the same time because Trent Brown, obviously it's the injury thing, and just not being on the field. When on the field, he's a very good player. So that one, okay. Gabe Jackson, he's not what he was early in his career, but I still think solid. So I think they're downgrading both those positions. Alex Leatherwood has a chance to be a really good player, but I think it's going to take some time for him, especially as a pass protector. He's their 1st round right tackle. Very talented guy, but he's definitely a better run blocker than pass protector. And then Denzel Good is definitely a better run blocker than pass protector, and he's taken over for Gabe Jackson. And then they have Andre James, or Nick Martin, probably Andre James, both of them a downgrade from Rodney Hudson. So they got worse, probably at 3 positions. Their left side is still rock solid in Colton Miller and Richie Incognito. I mean, Incognito's 38 years old, so the chances of him playing 12 or more games are probably not great. But when he's on the field, he's very good still. So there's just a lot of uncertainty here. I just think that they definitely, at least initially, are going to be one of the bottom 10 units in the league.
This Andre James dude hasn't even like played.
He has one career start.
It seems like they're putting a lot of their eggs in Tom Cable's basket to coach these guys up. What do you think of that strategy?
Well, if you asked me when he was Seattle's offensive line coach, we'd probably have a different conversation. Now it's like, you look at what he did with Colton Miller and, guiding him along in his development. I think that's a notch under his belt for sure. I mean, I don't want to discredit him there. I want to give him credit for that because Colton Miller is a guy who was very raw coming out of UCLA. He was just, he tested out of this world and had all the, the measurables and everything. And now he's revamped his body. He's stronger. He's better with his technique. Whatever they did with Colton Miller was very impressive. Whoever deserves that credit in the building, Tom Cable should get some of it. So that to me encourages me most of all with Alex Leatherwood. Kind of a similar dynamic. I think Leatherwood is further along than Colton Miller was in some aspects, but he does need some work. His ability to get a lot out of Andre James and Denzel Good. I think Denzel Good is what he is. He's just a mauling, big, enormous human being. He's a steamroller type of guy. If you ask him to move laterally and deal with speed rushers, it's going to be, it's not going to be good. So I don't know how much he can really do for him. I'm very curious to see what he does with Andre James and how his development goes because, having Rodney Hudson there, I think there's probably a pretty good chance that Hudson masked issues there or deficiencies in Cable's, teaching ability or lack thereof. If there is, I don't know, the intricate details of it, but Hudson is the type of center who is a force multiplier. He's a guy who's going to make the guys next to him better. He's like brilliant, and he's just one of those guys who can really captain the line and hide a lot of, of deficiencies. So it's going to be really interesting to see them without Rodney Hudson in there, getting them into the right protection at the right time, and just all those kind of like intricate things that great centers do. So yeah, I'm really concerned about that position probably more than anything.
All right. I want to get to listener questions, but I want to quickly go through overrated and underrated because overrated unit, you have the Washington football team at 25th. I've seen some people say they really like this Washington football team offensive line. I was a little bit surprised they didn't go offensive tackle in round one. They go with the linebacker, Jamin Davis, but in round two, they do take Sam Cosmi. I'm wondering what you think about Washington football team and anybody else you think is overrated because it seems like you think Washington football team might be a little bit overrated.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what the consensus is on them with other people. I actually bumped them up to 23 though. I flip-flopped them in Oakland or Las Vegas. So they're going to be 23 for the article. But still that might be lower than others. I'm not sure. And the reason for their ranking though, for me, it starts at the tackle position. Charles Leno, I think, is a solid player. And he's been reliable when he was in Chicago and everything. But certain pass rushers can give him a lot of trouble, like power rushers, and that concerns me. It always has in pass protection. He's an undersized guy with good length, and he's very aggressive, but there's a lot of variance in his performance, especially against elite competition. So that's why he's just a solid player and not much more than that. I think he's more of kind of a Band-Aid there. And then Sam Cosmi is, my comparison for him is Colton Miller in my scouting report. Very similar coming out, tested out of this world, has all the physical measurables and all that stuff, but I think has quite a long way to go technique wise as a pass protector in particular. That worries me a little bit. So I think there's going to be, at least initially, kind of a rocky road start for him. I think their interior could be, pretty good. Brandon Scherf obviously is an excellent player. I like the competition that they have going at left guard with Eric Flowers and Wes Schweitzer, who I think is an underrated player. And I really like their offensive line coach too. It's just, for me, what brought them down is the tackle situation. And I think that, they're probably set up to be a better run blocking team than pass blocking team, at least initially, until we get to see them together.
Yeah. Any other overrated units you want to mention?
Um, I think, I'm a little bit down on the Cardinals, compared to some other people, even though they got Rodney Hudson. That was a huge addition. I do think Rodney Hudson's on the tail end of his, career. I think he's outside of his prime, especially physically. I mean, mentally, he's going to do a lot for them, I think. But the right side of the line is concerning. I mean, Kelvin Beachum, he's very hit or miss, in performance, in my opinion, especially as a pass protector. And, I don't know if a guy like Josh Jones, who they drafted, a couple years ago, is going to take over there. I would like to see that, because I think Kelvin Beachum he's barely hanging on at this point. I think he's just a great guy to have in the locker room and things like that. And that's a big part of his value. And then Brian Winters, I guess, is going to start at right guard. Winters is a journeyman type guy who he's fun to watch for like an offensive line nerd like me, because he's undersized and he attacks people, but he gets overwhelmed a lot, especially, with against those premier type of pass rushers on the interior. So that right side is just concerning to me. And then the left side, I think, is overrated. DJ Humphries, I think, he's very athletic, and, he looks good moving around the field as a run blocker and stuff like that. But I still think technically as a pass protector, he's liable to fall apart against certain levels of competition. So that's why I have them at 24. I mean, I like their offensive line coach, Sean Kugler. I think he can, he's done good things. Humphreys is better now than he was when he first came in out of Florida, that's for sure. But I still think he's a little overrated. So we'll see what the Hudson effect is on this line, because I think it could be significant, and this rating could be a little low right now. But I'm hedging my bet on them on the low side, at least going in, until we see what it looks like.
On the underrated side of thing, real quick before we get to listener questions, one that would stick out to me from ratings is the Eagles. I think people think the Eagles' offensive line is a disaster, but when healthy, they're still really, really talented. That kind of sticks out to me as somebody that's maybe underrated the Eagles. Anybody else you want to mention that's underrated?
The Jaguars were going to be one of the teams that I mentioned here. Again, I don't, have a, kind of that context of how other people see them, but 15 to me, with kind of what we talked about, a chance of getting a couple spots higher, that might be a little higher than some think of them. The Lions, I don't know how people view them necessarily. I think it's kind of obvious that they're a solid unit, but I think they have a chance to be, much more than that. They're at the top of my solid tier right now at 10, but I think that they could be certainly in that very good tier and jump a tier. So for me with them, adding Penei Sewell, obviously, I was very high on him, and, it's kind of obvious what he is. I think he's going to be a stud, even if he's a better run blocker than pass blocker initially. Him and Taylor Decker, I think, is probably one of the 3 or 4 best tackle duos in the NFL right now. And to me, that carries so much weight in my rankings, especially geared towards pass protection. If your tackle duo is good, I think that can mask a lot of deficiencies you may have on the interior.
Yeah.
So that's a big reason why I'm high on them. And I think Frank Ragnow is about to be the best center in the league. If not the best, probably one of the 2 or 3 after this season. I think he's just on that trajectory. So there's a lot to like there, I think. So, and then the Eagles, like you said, they're very similar to the Cowboys in my opinion. They have aging guys like, Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks. These are guys who are elite players when healthy, but are they going to be healthy? That's basically, and I'm, assuming that these guys are going to be healthy and they have one more year in them. But it is kind of reminiscent of the Steelers a few years ago where, these guys have been great players, but they're getting up in age. So this could be the year that both of them fall apart, or it could be a year where they're both, borderline, if not elite. So that's why I came down on the very good for them. But Philly also, like Dallas, I really like their depth. Landon Dickerson's probably not going to be ready for a while, but to me, he was one of the best players in the draft period. He has a lot of injury concerns and all that, but he's a total stud. And if Kelsey were to go down later in the year, or Isaac Siamalu, I think he could come right in and be good right away. And they have other guys on the bench. That left tackle competition is going to result in probably a decent swing tackle. That's huge. I think Jordan
apparently in camp, Jordan Mailata, if I'm saying that right, has just been kicking Andre Dillard's ass.
That's why
Mailata has been doing really well.
Yeah, he's going to be the starter. I think that's just based on the tape last year, and Dillard, his experience so far in Philly has not been good in any regard, really. But if Dillard can just come in and be a decent swing tackle, not many teams have a first round pick with some upside as a swing tackle. And, I think that's probably a pretty good spot for him this year. I don't know if he'll ever be more than that. Hopefully he might be. I think play strength with him is the big thing, and toughness. But Mailata, man, I mean, so I was sitting with Lane Johnson at Offensive Line Masterminds, and he told me that when they reported first in the offseason this year, Mailata was like 390 pounds.
Oh, my God.
And they said he looked phenomenal. So he's just a freak. He's just a total freak. He's probably going to play around 370. 380. He's just a monster. And he's getting better. He's 24 years old. So yeah, that he has potential to just keep climbing, and if Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks and Jason Kelsey are 85% of what they are at their peak for 12 or more games, I'm very comfortable with where I have them, at 6th overall. So that's kind of, more background on why I'm maybe higher on them.
Got it. All right. Let's get to some listener questions here. Really appreciate all the questions. We got some very, very good ones. We are going to do a few of them, a fistful of them here today. First one comes from Scott. He says, are the Giants going to get Danny Dimes killed, or at least give Saquon a chance to do something positive this season? Obviously, a Giants fan is wondering here how the Giants offensive line shapes up in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, right now going in, I don't think it's looking great. To be honest, so much of it hinges on Andrew Thomas. I think, last year, excuse me, it was, frankly, a disaster. He was not good last year. He had good moments, but they were few and far between. So I don't think it's hopeless, but I'm definitely hedging on the downside, the pessimistic side on this until we see it for 6, 7, 8 weeks. I want to see at least that much amount of time of Andrew Thomas being solid before I, kind of move off that position, just because it just was really bad last year. So that's huge. And then they have another young guy, inexperienced guy, more inexperienced than Matt Pert, playing at right tackle, who, was up and down last year as well. And I think he has strength concerns. He's very tall and lean, and in terms of anchoring and, withholding the integrity of the pocket and stuff like that, I have concerns with him from his skill set standpoint. So I need to see that unfold. So when your two tackles have that going in, that's why they're, where they are in my rankings at 29. I think the interior can be decent, but, I'm not super high on any of those guys, except maybe I still am holding out some hope on Will Hernandez. I think he can be a decent player still. But I think he's a better run blocker than pass blocker. So, Nick Gates is interesting. He's a try-hard guy who basically fights people every snap. First year playing center last year in his whole career. So I think there's a good chance he'll be a little bit better. Shane Lemieux is a better run blocker than pass blocker. So to me, I think the most upside with this unit is in run blocking. And I just have a lot of concerns pass protection-wise with them.
Okay.
So whenever you have all those holes on your offensive line, you know what you got to do, right? You got to draft a gadget player, 4th receiver in the 1st round.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
You got to bring in Jason Garrett for some goal line fades too and wide receiver screens. Okay. I'm going to combine. We got 3 questions kind of along the same lines. I'm going to combine them into one here. It's all related to the Rams and zone gap man type scheme type questions. Kevin said he hears phrases like zone gap man schemes thrown around a lot in the context of running back skill set. Can we get a macro for dummies overview of what this means and how much it matters? And then Winky asked, I heard the Rams had to switch up their starting unit scheme and personnel after the Cam Akers injury to accommodate Darrell Henderson's style. Is this a cause for worry? And then a related question from Eric a couple years ago. I swore the Rams had a terrible offensive line once they lost Saffold, but it ended up not being an issue and I had egg on my face. How much of that success has been talent? How much can be attributed to McVay's scheme, keeping defenses on their heels? So these are all kind of related Rams questions, Brandon. I don't know if you caught all those, but basically macro for dummies on zone, gap, man scheme. How much does that matter? And do you really have to change an offensive line blocking scheme after an injury like Cam Akers had?
Yeah. So with the gap and zone difference there, I mean, if you just think of the zone run game, it's more lateral and gap is more downhill. So, you contrast the Vikings, who are very zone heavy, or 49ers, they've incorporated more gap, but Rams, teams like that, Shanahan tree teams, they're more zone lateral movement based offensive line and run games. So when you think about what running backs are doing there, I think what's more important there is vision and patience, because you really need to wait and see holes open up and then make quick decisions and get downhill in a hurry. You can't be indecisive. I think indecisive running backs are, basically the exact opposite of what you want in a zone scheme. Not that you want that ever, but that I think patience and decision-making and vision are more important in a zone scheme for runners. And then gap scheme, it's guys who are more reliant, I think, on athletic ability and size and strength. Guys who are going to get to a certain gap and, most likely have to make a linebacker miss or run him over, or, they're going to have more situations where they're going to have to do more on their own as opposed to rely on the scheme. So that's how I have kind of always seen the difference there. And then I think there's some merit to what that reader asked about the scheme changing with Akers and Henderson, because I think Jordan Rodriguez wrote about this in The Athletic, actually. And that's where I heard about it as well. And I think what she basically was saying is with Cam Akers, they were going to go, I think, more of a zone type of scheme with him. And I think when he got hurt, that's when they really started thinking about putting Austin Corbett at center. And I think that's where Austin Corbett's going to play now, is he's going to switch from right guard to center. And I think part of that is due to Henderson being in the lineup. And I think that's going to result in some more of a diverse run scheme this year to fit what Henderson does well. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. There's more detail. Jordan does a great job covering the Rams, if people don't know, for The Athletic, but she wrote about that in more detail, which is very interesting with Corbett, especially because I thought he was great last year at right guard. So moving to center is interesting. And what was the other part about McVay?
Yeah, people have said for a while that the Rams obviously wasn't that good, especially after they lost Roger Saffold. Eric was asking how much of that can be attributed to Sean McVay's scheme, keeping defenses on their heels.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. I mean, that's factored into my rankings is the coaching, the play calling, specifically, and the offensive line coach. I think Aaron Kromer has been a really good coach. He's not there right now. I think there's some sort of dispute behind the scenes that led to that release there. I don't think it was based on his, inability to coach, but Kromer was there, for, I think, McVay's entire tenure. This will be the first year he hasn't been there. So always having Aaron Kromer and then McVay, just keeping defenses on their heels and, utilizing play action and doing all these things that make life easier for offensive line is huge. So yeah, I think McVay is a big part of the offensive line performance, as was, the offensive line coach.
Yeah. I've kind of gotten warmer on Darrell Henderson in the recent weeks since kind of everything settled down from the injury. I think he's going to play well. And yeah, I find it fascinating that they would change an entire offensive line lineup and scheme to accommodate a running back. But yeah, for sure. Okay. From Tim, do offensive line injuries tend to hurt the passing game or the running game more? And then also he asked, can you quantify how much losing a left tackle hurts versus, say, losing a right guard? So first question was, do offensive line injuries tend to hurt the passing game or the running game more?
I think that's so case dependent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it depends on the run scheme. So if it's a zone run scheme, like a Shanahan type style offense, I think it might be the run game, because there's so much, the guys have to be in sync when you're doing that, because you're blocking areas instead of men, right? You're blocking, areas instead of defenders. So you have to be in sync with the guy next to you. You're moving in sync in one direction or the other, an outside zone. So if you have an injury to that, it can really disrupt the chain and kind of break it all apart and, create, just little gaps in what you're doing. So if it's a zone run scheme, I'd say maybe the run game. Now, if it's a pass game, like, the Packers with Aaron Rodgers before LaFleur got there, where the tackles are on islands pretty much, every game, and there's really no schemed help there. If a guy gets hurt there, it's pass protection. So I think it's dependent on the scheme and what guys are asked to do.
Yeah. One thing that Evan and I talk about during the years, we look for clusters. Like if a bunch of right guards and right tackles are down on a team, that's way more impactful, obviously, than just losing one right tackle. Do you think that's the right way to think about it? Like this cluster type situation for injuries on offensive lines?
Yeah. Like if two guys are hurt on the same side.
Yep.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Just because, that's just another part of the run game and the blocking scheme and the protection scheme that are gone, and just, two guys that you have to get up to speed at the same time as opposed to one, it makes it much more difficult.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that one's, no brainer for sure.
Evan and I haven't had a chance to talk since the Quentin Nelson injury. I want to get Evan's take first on Jonathan Taylor with Quentin Nelson going down also. And again, 5 to 12 weeks. He could be back for week 1, or he could miss like 2 months. How have you thought about Jonathan Taylor, Evan, since the Quentin Nelson injury and also coupled with the Carson Wentz injury?
Yeah, I looked at moving him down the rankings, but we're already pretty low on him, to be perfectly frank, because his opening schedule is really difficult. He is a guy that's game script dependent. If they're behind in games, like Naheem Hines is going to come into the game, and that's going to hurt Jonathan Taylor. I think he's right around number 14 overall right now. I don't think I'm going to move him any lower than that, probably. But I do think that he is at grave risk of a slow start. And, speaking of clusters, this is a great little segue, because Eric Fisher is not going to be ready for week 1. Quentin Nelson might not be ready for week. All of a sudden, we have a cluster situation on an offensive line that has been one of the most bankable over the last 3 years. So I don't know. Take it away, Brandon. What do you think about the Colts offensive line right now? And who are they going to be playing? Jake Eldrenkamp?
I think Sam Tevy.
Yep, Sam Tevy. Yeah.
Yeah, which, that's going to be a huge glaring hole, especially in pass protection.
Oh, because one of the initial points that you made, I remember, was you were like, hey, they can kind of make do, at least for a little while, with a maybe a below league average left tackle, because they have Quentin Nelson.
Right. Yeah. So my 11 ranking for them at 11th overall is predicated on Quentin Nelson being there for week 1. So assuming it's, 4 of the 5 returning starters with the new left tackle, I think they're going to be a solid unit. Solid 11 overall, which is, kind of the top of the solid tier. I think that 4 of the 5 starters returning is still going to allow them to be a pretty high performing line. I think they can do a lot of creative things with, protecting Sam Tevy and pass protection, just to kind of get by until Fisher comes back. But if Nelson isn't there, then this ranking would not be what it is, and it would change everything, So, I'm just assuming Nelson will be there, but if not, it's way different.
They do have a badass tight end blocker in Mo Alley Cox that they can stick in there and just
he looks like a tackle.
Ass. Yeah, right. I mean, just play him at left tackle.
He's popping in the PSM hard is Mo Alley Cox. We'll keep an eye on Quentin Nelson's injury ahead of week 1. Question from Thomas, second to last question here. He asked about a few teams, but I'm specifically interested. He asked about the Jets, because I have some optimism for the Jets offense this year. Michael Carter, I've been taking a ton of. His ADP has started to rise a lot. Elijah Moore, I think, is going to end up starting. I like him. I think Zach Wilson may not be good right out of the gate, but he'll at least be fun. And so talk to people about the offensive line? Because I think there's some optimism for the offensive line too. You have them at 19th though.
Yeah, top of tier 4 for them. I think the arrow's pointing up for them. I mean, still, center and right guard will start with the negative first. Those positions are there's a lot of questions there. I know Connor McGovern and Greg Van Roten are, going to start, but I think those guys are both below average. So those are the holes or the kind of the weak links of the unit. But when they signed Morgan Moses in July, that to me is what really did this, because it forced Chuma Adoga and George Fant to the bench to fight for the swing tackle job, which is a great position to be in. You want one of those guys as your swing and not your starter. So it strengthened the whole group. And I think Morgan Moses is just a reliable guy. I mean, to have out there who you can win with. I mean, he hasn't missed a game in 6 years. And Mekhi Becton at the other side, I think could be a superstar. And then drafting Elijah Vera Tucker to pair alongside Becton and to really let them build with each other. I think that left side, it honestly has potential to be one of probably the 5 best left sides in the league this year. Mm-hmm. If those guys are able to really, play together. So, and then on top of all that, you install a Shanahan type of scheme here now, with Mike LaFleur coordinating things, John Benton coming over. You basically are going to do a lot of what San Francisco has done, and that's just a very offensive line friendly environment to develop guys in, just because of the play action, the zone run game, the misdirection, and things like that. So yeah, I think they're in a good environment now to develop, and they have some legit talent there as well. So yeah, I think the arrow is pointing up for them.
For sure. All right. Last question before we get you out of here. Kyle wants to know, who are Brandon's favorite guys to watch on tape? Does anyone get him very, very, very excited? Who are your favorite guys to watch on tape, Brandon?
Oh man. I mean, Quentin Nelson, is obvious. Zach Martin's probably my favorite, player to watch, period. Just cause he's just incredibly sound. He never makes mistakes. It's crazy to watch him. I mean, I really liked watching Tristan Wirfs last year. Trent Williams, is a freak. Those are probably the main guys.
Do you think that Doug Gottlieb watches a lot of George Kittle in the trenches?
Oh, I love that you brought that up.
I got to tell him the backstory, I guess, because Gottlieb said that George Kittle couldn't block, and then Thorn just sent him like a mashup of George Kittle just crushing people.
Yeah.
I know. Oh, that was a layup, man. I mean, when I saw it, I was just like, I just pulled like 50 clips, and I'm like, all right, well, here you go. I mean, some guys, some people just say stuff sometimes about blocking, and it's funny because you could just tell, he just has no idea. He probably just looking at him and seeing like he's not as big as Gronk, and he's athletic. Maybe he just made a bad assumption.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we've said it all on offensive lines for today. You can find Brandon's full offensive line rankings in the draft kit. Each week you can find Brandon's offensive line, defensive line mismatches, which I use every week when making my DFS lineups. You can find that in the in-season package along with his mid-season update, which will be in there. Really, really valuable stuff, Brandon. Appreciate you coming on. Tell the people where they can find you on the social media machine.
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at BrandonThorn.com or at BrandonThornNFL, sorry. And then my Substack is trenchwarfare.substack.com. And that's going to be a good resource, I think, for people in a lot of different ways. I'm going to have the true sack rate updated weekly and all kinds of cool stuff during the season. So, yeah.
All right, man. Thanks so much for being here. Everybody check out Brandon's article in the draft kit on Friday. For producer Luke, for Brandon, for Evan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.